while I'm talking today, our TA is going to take my iPhone and he's going to walk around the room to each of you. When he gets to you, give him just a moment so he can focus, because it takes a minute. It thinks it's focused over here. It's not brilliant, not exactly deep AI. But when he gets there and it gets focused, please just say your name. Say your whole name, and then if there's something else besides your legal name, the way it shows up on the roster, that you'd like to be called, say it and pronounce it. The reason for that is, although I know your names, I don't know how you say them. I know them just in print now, because I know what you wrote on the board, and I know what is on the roster and what you put on the attendance sheets. But some of your names I'm looking at, and they can be pronounced many different ways. And it's always a little embarrassing when people butcher your name, so I prefer not to butcher your names. So he's just going to come around and ask you to just say it. Now, I'm not going to use the footage for anything else. It's just for me. It'll live on my phone, and it'll get erased after I know all the material. Same thing with the pictures that were taken where you stood by the board and wrote your name, or the selfies that you sent to me. Those have no other use. You won't see them showing up someplace surprising you in the National Enquirer or something like that. See them in the tabloids or in the Campus Chronicle. You're just for my memory. Because if I don't have a label to put on in my scaffolding for each person, then whenever you and I talk, it just kind of goes into, oh yeah, that person, and I don't like that. And before each class period, when I review to make sure that I know your names, each of you, when I look at your name, I pray for you by name. So every time when you come to class, I will have prayed for you every single time we get together by name. And sometimes over the weekend as well, during this term. So for whatever that's worth, you can know that somebody is thinking about you several times a week, specifically, and praying for you. If you ever have any prayer requests that you'd like me to pray for during my worship time, I'd be delighted for you to text them or email them to me, and I'll be happy to remember that when I'm praying for you. Okay? Let me set you up with the phone here. Did you start the attendance? Perfect. There you go. Just press the button. We're going to continue to look at what this philosophy thing is, and we're going to be getting into the pre-Socratics a little bit. Now, I'm going to give you all a chance to earn some more substantial, in one shot, some more substantial Kurzweil amounts. 2 or 3 times during the term, we'll get some names out to you, and you'll have a chance to say, I'll take that name off there. When you research that name, you become an expert in that philosophy. And then we'll have, you can take 5 minutes and tell the class about that person. So you'll teach them the biographical stuff about the person. I'll do very little in terms of giving you the Wikipedia facts about each person. But those kinds of facts, frankly, Wikipedia is a great place to get some of the basics on that. It'd be nice if it wasn't the only place that you look. You can go on YouTube and find somebody that gave a lecture on the person and blow 17 minutes on a lecture or something. Or you can look it up in a book. Remember books? There's several of them here on campus. I'm told I haven't been to the library for a little while because it seems like I haven't been needing books. If I do, I buy them on Amazon because I'm too lazy to go to the library. So, and I suspect some of you do the same. Get a Kindle version instead of going to the library. Yeah? Sometimes you can even get a PDF of the whole book. Whether you're supposed to or not, you can get a PDF of the whole thing. So today, I want to talk a little bit about the birth of philosophy in terms of when you want to know about something, you want to know something about its origins. If I ask you, just tell me about yourself. If I say, I want you to just define yourself for me, one of the things that you're likely to say is where you're from. You're likely to tell me like how you came about. You might, if you have an unusual story about your parenting, or you never knew your mom, or you never knew your parents, or you were orphaned, or you didn't know your dad, or your dad's in prison or something. All the time you're growing up. That all might be really important for anybody to know in order to know anything significant about you. Well, the same thing is true of this living, breathing discipline of philosophy. If you don't know something about what it isn't, what it was like before the thing, and where it comes from, and some ideas about how it might have come about, then it's very hard to get a whole picture in some sort of context. And it is important, not just so that we can impress people someday with our great wisdom and our great knowledge. It's important that we have an idea of the scope of human history and the history of human thought, because we're at a time when human thought is in great transition. It's a very serious transition, and right now, if people are just a little bit older than one another, they might be working side by side. They might even be taking the same courses in school. I mean, you could have peers that are a bit older than you, people of my age or even younger than me, who have a very, very different concept of reality and how to live life than you have just because of your age. Now, that was not true when I was a child. It wasn't really true when I was a college student. Things really were not that different than they had been for the last 50 years. They really weren't that different. Things have changed more since you were born than what they usually change throughout human history in centuries. Centuries. And things are about to change so fast that half of you are going to feel like the changes are sort of newfangled stuff and you're going to become already too conservative to accept them. It's going to change so fast that you'll definitely, most of you will not reach 30 before you say, I'm out. And you start acting like what these kids have got going is funky and I'm not into that stuff. You really will, because it's going to accelerate it. It's going to push down the age of people that are divided from people that are emerging into adulthood. So the division is going to become among people that are closer in age because of how fast it's changing. Because each of us makes a certain sort of a schema matrix of what we think is really the real stuff. And other stuff always gets compared and contrasted to that for the rest of our lives. Very little about that changes for most people. I can remember when I was 9 years old, my grandparents, my mom's mom and her stepdad, since she was little, moved across the street from us. And so I was able to go over to my grandparents' house and spend quite a bit of time. My grandfather never could accept that the economy had inflated prices and that wages and even his retirement were going up and the cost of things were also going up. Every time I'd have something, he'd say, hey, what'd you pay for that? He always called me Bricktop because I was a redhead and thought my hair was the same color as bricks. He'd say, hey, Bricktop, what'd you have to pay for that? What'd you give for that? And I'd say, give for what? That skateboard. $12. $12? $12! I bought a house for less than that. It didn't matter what it was. He bought a house for less than that. Or 2 cars once in the same day for less than that. It didn't make any difference. This is a guy that was born in 1889. When the big San Francisco earthquake hit very early in the 20th century, he was in San Francisco at the time that it hit. He was even outdoors putting his horses away. Literally, he was a person who drove a delivery vehicle pulled by horses, and he had been out coming back from some long run somewhere in the Bay Area and had used a ferry and all of that, and he was putting the horses away when the earthquake hit. And so from 1889, I was able to talk to him about his memories growing up in the 19th century. And my grandmother was born in 1901. These people remember when it was a big newfangled thing that people with good sense just didn't get involved with, this flight stuff. Flight. And their parents could never accept automobiles. That was all just horse manure to them, that someone would put one of those dangerous motor things instead of a horse like you should have. And it was bizarre to them, that they had a telephone. And the older they got, the more inclined they got to walk or drive several blocks to go tell somebody something instead of picking up the phone. And you have to say, why don't you just use the phone? It's pouring rain. There's a lightning outside. They also, when they started getting to where, when you dial 767 and then any four numbers, it used to give you the time on a recorded loop. So every 10 seconds, it would announce the time again. At the tone, the time is 3:10 and 10 seconds. Beep. At the tone, the time is 3:10 and 20 seconds. Beep. And it did that. You could stay on the line for a minute and a half or so, and then it would hang up on you. My grandmother was convinced that that was a lady who was there, and she kept saying, well, thank you, dear. Grandma, that's a recording. It's like a record player. Oh, there's no record players. You can't put a record player in the phone. There's a record player. Well, the record player was like darn near as big as this. I mean, it had a turntable for 33 1/3, but I mean, it was a serious dominating the living room piece of furniture. It was huge. And she would say, you're going to tell me that there's one of those in this. Of course there's not. There's a lady. So we could never convince her, you know. And that's cute. But you and I are heading there. Most of us are heading there in some way. Because it's going to get so funky and so weird so fast that I don't care how prepared everybody here is, at least a percentage of you will at some point disengage with that progress and say, sorry, negative. Negative. Because people are about, I mean, we're on the edge of people going in to reprogram their own genes. Do you realize, I'm not playing. We possess the capability now, and we'll be using it. It'll be if you haven't watched movies like Gattaca, if you've ever seen Gattaca, that's worth your time, except for one thing. And I may recommend several movies that are philosophically significant during this course. But the ones that are futuristic are almost always dystopia. Okay? A dystopia is a bad place, a miserable place. I mean, just the word defines as a miserable place. The word utopia is a really great place. The topos is just place. It's just a location in Greek. And dis, don't diss me. It's just like what it sounds like. Dystopia, a really jerked up place. And utopia, like euthanasia is a good death. Thanatos is death. So you means good, pleasant, well. So when you watch most futuristic sci-fi movies, almost every one of them, at least, is dystopian. Because it's only really interesting at the box office when it terrifies you and makes you worry. It's compelling. People, if somebody portrayed for you on Halloween, you go down to some theater with your friends on Halloween night, and they show you a movie, and you sit there, and all it shows is several people cutting into three different people's day, and it goes for an hour and a half or 2 hours, and all it shows is 3 people having a nice day. Just a regular old day. Well, that's going to just rake it in at the box office, isn't it? I mean, the awards are just going to pile on. But if you show somebody getting disemboweled, then you text your friends before it's even over when you're not supposed to use your phone in the theater. You got to see this, man. This is good, man. I got to see this movie about the 30-foot man, It was a regular height, but then they strung him out. Oh, it was really something, If it's yuck, there's something about it we want to see. If you think that the flares on the road and all the fluid and broken glass might also be showing somebody who's splayed open and getting CPR that isn't working, the inclination is not to just say, well, I'll just keep my eyes front and just go the speed limit as long as I can. No, people have all got to stop and see if they can get some wisdom by seeing somebody's worst day. There's something in us that wants to see something terrible. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the notion on those occasions that somebody's got it worse than us, so that in terms of how everything stacks up, on the curve, we're doing pretty good, at least today. At least we're not spread out on the pavement. So there is that. The things that could be portrayed, however, might be mildly interesting, but we don't watch movies that don't have conflict. We don't watch movies that don't kind of get our limbic system going. They're not compelling, and we're used to that. In fact, we're addicted to it. But in the future, we're actually capable of reducing conflict. Because conflict comes often when somebody has something that another somebody wants to have, but there's not enough for them to both have it. Right? That's when you have conflict, because people value things that are scarce. If you, right now, if I offer you 30 minutes of fresh air, breathing air, for $50, you're not going to pay me $50, because you're going, dude, I would say look around, but you don't even have to look. You can't see it, but it's kind of ubiquitous. If things are ubiquitous, then that means they're just everywhere and they're just for the taking. When something's ubiquitous, it's just everywhere and you can't run out of it. Okay? But if we were diving, and we were actually diving a wreck at 110 or 15 feet, and 30 some odd meters, and for some reason, you looked and you had 2 minutes of air in your tank. 2 minutes of air. And the person next to you also had 2 minutes of air. Now, with that 2 minutes, you do not, if we were down there for long enough to empty that tank, you do not just go scurrying to the top when you're down there. You can't. You have to stay down and stage up, or you're going to have very serious nitrogen problems. You're going to have the bends big time and could kill you, to rip you apart. So here I am, the only other diver, and I have barely enough for 2 people, me and one other person, to buddy breathe on my extra regulator. So one of you's going to get it, one of you's not. Worth $50 to me? Would you give $50 for me to share with you? I mean, you guys might be bidding up in hand signals, using your little diver chalkboard thing, But right then, you would give everything for just a few minutes of air out of my tank. So if in the future stuff doesn't cost anything, then what's it worth? And why would there be conflict over it? Right now, most of the conflict is actually, in our world, is over stuff that translates into either special kinds of matter or special kinds of energy. We fight and kill and destroy countries and assassinate people and blow villages up and everything in order to get energy-rich minerals from under their property. But if energy was free all the time to everybody, if we didn't ever need any gasoline, we didn't ever need any electricity to come in the pipe, in the wire, we didn't need any natural gas to come in the house for the stove, the dryer, we don't need any of that stuff. Because everybody, for free, can have devices that are just so efficient, so effective at turning sunlight or ambient matter into energy, just like that, more energy than you could ever need. If all the devices that consume energy handled their own energy, we don't even have to think about it. They just handle it because of the way they're configured. They just take molecules out of the air and find a way to extract the energy from. Do you think there's energy in the molecules in the air, in the atoms that make up the molecules in the air? Oh, you betcha. You betcha. There's enough energy in the air to blow the whole continent off the map. Certainly enough to run some silly little devices like the ones that we use and cook with and heat our house and all that stuff. So if we had a device in our house that would make stuff the way it is on Star Trek, like The Next Generation, where Captain Picard says, tea, Earl Grey, hot, and a cup of perfect tea appears, and he takes it and drinks it. It's in a replicator, they call it. If you had one of those in your house, and if the thing could make things as big as you want, and you could even make another replicator with it, then what would you go to the store for? What would Amazon be for? All you have to do is just go and talk to it and say, hey, I need a yada yada. I need one of these. And boom, it comes up. Or better yet, are you aware that now, some of you probably are, some of you already probably game with this equipment, but you can actually put on a headset that is performing a limited electroencephalograph, a limited reading of the signals that escape your head close to it. And you can practice controlling your cursor and making letters and controlling a first-person player character on the screen by just thinking. Did you know that? That's already out. That's not even new. That's been out for 4 or 5 years. That you can use an interface device that you just put on your head and control your computer. And it's getting better all the time. It will get to the point where that won't be outside. It will get to the point where that's actually inside, under your skull, nanoscale devices that are just circulating and find their way to the right places and then just are there, so they can very precisely. Now this stuff where we has to be transcranial, and we get all kinds of interference, and we've got signals upon signals, and it's only just what escapes at a point. That kind of stuff that's gone. That's gonna go. We're gonna be having tiny little robots that are able to read individual synapses that are smaller than the synapses, that are everywhere, and that are in a swarm, that are reporting to the cloud. And we have proof of concept for those kinds of things. That's not Fantasyland, never will happen, magic wand, Harry Potter stuff. That's something that people are hot on the trail of right now. Imagine that all you have to do is imagine something that you want to be made of matter. And it appears. Because a swarm of nanobots that just accompanies you manufactures it from ambient atomic material right in front of you. And there it is. You imagine, you picture it, and then you look at it and you say, you don't have to say anything, you don't move your lips. You just have the thought, I wanted that the other direction. You know, and you picture it different because once you see it, you don't like it. And so you trade it in right away.
That's how we imagine God works, huh?
It is. It is. And can you imagine that those of us that are very religious, that are very protective of something that acts like God, when technologies like this appear, is there anybody in this room who, if we could do that next year, this time next year, by Christmas, and it won't be that soon, but it'll be in your life, most of you, and it'll be faster than you can imagine. You won't be my age when that comes about, I don't think. But can you even imagine yourself or any of the people you know in here that if that was capable of happening, if we were capable of just getting a device like that, getting an implant, getting a shot that puts these nanobots in, and then having these nanobots that are also sort of dispersed around us, that just stay by us and that just are in communication with the nanobots inside of our nervous system. Could you imagine saying, I'm not doing that, that's blasphemous?
I think they started like certain chips and people's all this stuff to like pay for.
Absolutely. My son has an RFID in his hand. My son is a cyborg. He can walk up to his car and it comes open, it turns on. He can come to my front door and he can just reach for the knob and put his hand on the thing and the deadbolt opens and he walks in. He has an RFID. Not only that, he has an additional sense. He can sense magnetic fields in the other hand, in the side of the finger. So he can go up to your computer and he can control it. He's practiced with some models. He can put it to sleep. He can wake it up. He can tell where your drive is. He can tell where speakers are and everything. He just, if there's a magnetic field, he can tell.
You can't try no credit card ever again in that hand.
No, it's not strong enough to hurt it. It won't hurt it. In fact, if he gets it by his RFID, it doesn't matter. It's very weak. It's not. I mean, he can pick up staples, but they'll fall off easily.
Is this for his job or something? Why does he have that?
He's a futurist.
So it's just available?
It's partly for our research.
Everybody to convert it.
Yeah, you can do it. You can go to dangerousthings.com and order one tonight.
That's a
Dangerousthings.com.
Dangerous.
Yeah. It's a company that configures the devices, and they give you little injectors that come with it. Most people go to like a tattoo and piercing place and have them put it in, but my son didn't do that. My son has physician and surgeon friends. He actually had surgeons do this thing.
Oh, right. Can't they do those tattoos that play music now too?
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Not only that, there's new tattoos that will diagnose things, that will tell you certain things in your blood chemistry and that sort of thing that are temporary, that will go away within a certain number of months or about the amount of time that they need to monitor it, after a procedure or whatever. That's a thing. Now, we have already started mixing people with technology. I've had people that have 2 titanium hips and 2 artificial knees that are sat in my living room when they're trying to reckon with this going, I would never mix myself with technology. You're already bionic, dude. You would have been in a wheelchair when I was a kid. And they've also got artificial lenses in their eyes. The same people that are saying, "Oh, I'd never do it."
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like, basically, with the invention of tools, it wasn't this kind of inevitable with that knowledge.
It is inevitable the way it's progressed. And here's the thing. You might want to explore this a little. You know what? I won't even waste your time with it. We'll show a movie in class about it and introduce the idea of exponential technological progress. I'll show you the movie. It's called Transcendent Man. It's the story of Ray Kurzweil. I'll show you the movie during the class.
So at what point does technology become, not anti-religious, but Mark of the Beast type? Because that's feeling
Well,
pretty Mark of the Beast. Mark of this
everybody
world.
has tried everything they can to try to diagnose what is and what isn't the mark of the beast.
Isn't the
That
Adventist
feels close.
point of view on
That
what
feels
the
very
mark of
close
the
to
beast
it.
is just rejecting God?
Well, Adventists have identified the beast with papal power, whether primarily with the papacy and all the things that required the Protestant Reformation and all of that, but also with acting like that, you know. So they're going to be trying to do double duty to call it the mark of the beast. If it's just people like putting it in themselves, it's not, you know. I don't know, but I suppose it would parallel enough to make a lot of people really nervous. Like we were just saying, people will start dropping off of this and finding a religious reason to say I'm out very soon. Like, what if that RFID in my son's hand was doing his Apple Pay? And it's not like he can't just take out a credit card instead, but I mean, we can construe it to say can't buy and sell unless you have the mark in your hand. What it actually probably meant, you know, in the prophecy, is another matter.
It was the head and the hand, which has to do with the priests, and they had the Bible and the Torah in their head and their hand, right?
They used to bind the scripture to their wrist and to their forehead. Because I guess they felt like there was something symbolic, or maybe there was an osmotic learning or something like that. I think they were guilty of what we would call bibliolatry. You know, they were making an idol out of those letters and reports that the prophets had written. I'm not sure. I mean, they seemed devout, and so we admire that, but it probably was misguided.
Grandma Mark would have his interpretation of the Bible since the neighbors.
Oh, cool. Cool. Yeah, well, that's an interesting connection with it. I think that actually, when it says that you're marked in here and in here, my guess is that it probably represents what function is here. This is where our executive control, like our will, is like what we're willing to do to other people and stuff. Is behind here, and this is the action. That's right. This is what you do. So you can do something, but did you mean to? You know, what's your motive? It's like, oh, I took a life with my hands. I killed somebody, but I didn't mean to. You still killed them. Yeah, but we want to look at what was my motive. What was my frame of mind? You know, state of mind is a part of the, like for a 187 offense in California, you have to have intent.
So would you say that it's when it becomes connected where your actions are based on something?
Yeah, and they're
motive
beastly.
behind it?
And they're beastly. Yeah, absolutely. That's the penal code section for murder. For actually a homicide, you know, that's not excusable. Because there's homicides that are excusable, but that's not one of them. Yes.
So what's the difference between Jesus's era and our era? What makes people right now developing this awesome technology? Why couldn't they do that back then until Jesus came back? You know what I mean? Why?
Right. Why is it happening now instead of some other time in history? I suppose my grandparents could have asked that about why. And the phone. I mean, imagine the difference when you couldn't just pick up the phone and call somebody in Europe. Even the president couldn't talk to somebody across the ocean without sending mail by ship. And those ships had a certain percentage of the time that they actually made it there. And they often sunk. Try to do like diplomacy by mail.
President was tweeting.
And now we have a president that's tweeting. It was inevitable.
Yeah.
It was.
You said with the increase in technology, we wouldn't have any for conflict.
Yeah, why would we have conflict over stuff and energy when everyone has all that they want?
Well, wouldn't religion still be
Good point.
for that?
That's a good point. Do you notice what's happening to religion?
It's getting stuck.
It's going. Isn't that interesting?
Okay, so we read in the book about Socrates,
Uh-huh.
right? And Plato. So all these people have been sitting around thinking
Yes.
for years and years and years.
And they started this whole mess.
Right, but none of them could have thought of modern technology because only in the last 150 years have we gotten close, and now we're at microchips. Like, our technology is advancing so quickly,
Are
but
you
why did it
sure?
take so long?
Yeah,
Or, listen here, or conspiracy. We only know what we live in currently. So really, history isn't real. I think there's a name for this, but,
It's called historiography.
right. So we
Yeah.
only know what we've seen
That's right.
in our existence, but
That's
really
right.
there's nothing 3D and nothing.
How many minutes of history do you think we have compared to that we have recorded compared to the amount of human activity since there have been
Right.
humans?
That's what I'm saying.
Not even
But you're
a
telling me
fraction
those
of
people
a
could have
fraction of
thought
a
of this?
percent.
Maybe they could have, but it's kind of like you have to introduce things slowly, otherwise people are gonna be like, what?
Here's the scary thing.
Right, but it
Here's
was
the
so
scary thing.
slow.
They
And
did.
then now it's really quick, like rapid,
No,
they put
The
microchips.
very frontier of our science, the two most significant, this is as far as it goes, and we might not be able to go any further. That's the end of science in those areas, by definition, are quantum mechanics and neuroscience, consciousness. That is the tip of the spear for science right now. For human knowledge, the most out there, farther than anyone's ever gone in any field, are those two things. And we haven't actually gone any further via science than the pre-Socratics went without modern technology.
Because we're still asking the same
We
question
got to
that
what they got to.
Socrates supposedly
That's
had,
what makes these guys
if he was
bizarre. You want a conspiracy theory? Read about the pre-Socratics. Where did they get it? How did human minds come up with stuff that we've required proton accelerators to get? They had it, and that's why we're going to study them.
So because like all life kind of depends on like progression and trying, like whenever there's something that would help us like eat or something like that, it's a big advancement. And like I'm taking astronomy, and I've learned that we were actually going very slow, but now we're accelerating. So isn't that like parallel to the way like technology is moving too? Like it was slow and then it accelerates, and then eventually we're trying to
You're going to love this movie.
we're trying to get to like what Hegel was talking about, like,
Yeah.
just straight up God, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And do you know what it seemed like? Do you know what it seemed like? When that happened? Do you know what that seemed like to some old religious people when that happened?
The shell pieces from Fahrenheit 451.
Yeah. This is some scary stuff. I'm running. I'm 3 miles from anything, and someone calls me, and I'm talking from this thing. But guess what? I'm willing to have them just implant this. What's the big deal? They have implanted pacemakers and they have implanted defib machines. Defib machines are like a lunchbox still, but they have the size of a silver dollar that get implanted for people that have long QT syndrome.
Someone could hack it. They could
So
hack it.
sure, they probably have, but I'd be willing to have them just install this here in a heartbeat. I don't have to mess with it again if they can just perfect charging it from some sort of energy source in my body, or I just charge it inductively by putting a thing next to my head, like putting on a little earmuff thing once a day. I'll do that, I'll wear it.
But this is already out, like LASIK eye surgery is like the exact same thing. And they can make your eyes better than they were before.
Way better.
So then do you think it's like God like moderates how much knowledge he gives an era? You know what I mean? Like
I don't. He might, and my thinking so is not very significant.
It
Or
seems
thinking not, but I doubt it. I don't know. Could be though.
our progress seems quite similar to how the more we learn as an individual, the more we realize we really don't know. Because with each
Oh, and
step, we get
now
bigger,
you're showing us how philosophy got born.
bigger. And I'm working on this with the second language because I'm at the knowledge that I'm trying to get there, and each level it gets bigger.
And the more you get into that second language, the more experiences you're going to have with. Oh, is that what it meant in my language? We don't even know our own language until we learn a second language, which is bizarre.
You've been over here with your hand up for a minute, but I do have a question. But just
Going
like
back
not
to
please.
technology and science, I've
What?
heard theories about how the exoplanets.
Let's bring it in. We want to hear what she's got to say.
So I've heard some theories about how the antediluvians were like really like well like versed in like the sciences and how like dinosaurs were a result of crossbreeding and things like that, and then the flood was because of this and also like all the other sins, and then she kind of was saying like God was he like
Like- Moderates his
Yeah, exactly.
knowledge acquisition.
yeah, just
He might. How would he do it?
So
Well, you better put your
How would he do it?
it's
If he did
important.
it,
It's
Lying.
important.
You
if
would
he
lie.
did it, would he
You would
be
lie.
violating our freedom of choice? If he's mucking up in our minds, is he like invalidating the great controversy experiment?
right. Then is it the devil? Then you know that opens our mind each time.
No, I think it's us. I think fearfully and wonderfully are we made. I do.
You think that he endowed us with the ability to
Yeah. That's the miracle, is we were created to be uber creative. Uber creative.
But we're not
Do you
ready for
think
it.
that God was against penicillin? Or the polio vaccine? Or agriculture? No?
Isn't that why?
I don't think so.
That's kind of like the point of religion, right? Because we know everything is going to be progressing. So there's a point where we know we're not experience it. We're not going to experience it. So we have faith in God because He is that thing. So we don't have to experience it firsthand. We have this transcendent experience.
Yes, we do. And the transcendent experience, I think, is what makes the difference between mere religion and actual spirituality. Although that's kind of a newish modern term to even make a difference between spirituality and religion like that, and it's not ideal. There's this kind of way of being religious where you don't have a spiritual life. There's nothing transcendent. You're against any kind of worship that's transcendent. You're against any meditation that's transcendent. You're against somebody trying to ask for a miracle like Jesus commanded us to. Against everything except just whatever dead tradition. So religiosity can be naked of spirituality. Right? I'll be right back.
Okay, so I've had like 5 different things But
Yeah, your name was not one of the ones I had trouble pronouncing.
if someone tried to say Megan, but
I know better.
you'd be surprised. Thank you. So, anywho, what I was gonna say is, way back there, I was gonna ask about how close are we to finding immortality then. But that was a
We're very
rhetorical
close.
question. But
We're very
next
close.
thing is, what about drugs? When you're escaping consciousness, you turn to drugs.
Well, that doesn't
right?
escape
So, what
consciousness
is
in all
that?
cases. Sometimes it just gives you changes of consciousness, altered consciousness.
But if we're talking about transcendence,
We have drugs
that
that make
is
transcendent
transcendence
experiences.
at its finest, friends.
Well, not necessarily finest,
Not
it is
finest, but I mean at
inarguably
its.
transcendent. And it has spiritual ramifications.
So what do philosophers think of drugs? Do they?
Which philosophy?
Yeah.
That's I don't know any of them.
I'm not willing to.
You?
I'm not willing to take a substance, to take a chemical, willy-nilly, when I know that the odds are not even 50-50 that I'll have a positive transcendent experience. If it was guaranteed that it wasn't going to screw me up and make me psychotic, it was guaranteed that I wouldn't be flashing back and having, the screamy mamies for the rest of my life. And it was guaranteed to give me a positive sense of oneness, like it did for my father, who used LSD for his spirituality. When he was a philosophy student at Berkeley, it was perfectly legal at the time.
Was he one of the students? No. There was an experiment where they had,
It wasn't a documented experiment, but it was during the same era that you're speaking of. But that was at Harvard.
yes, that's right.
That was Ram Dass, Stanley Krittner. Who's the big guy? Let me think. Who's the big guy that was there in charge of them all? I'll say it in just a second because he's. It'll pop in and I'll say it before long. The psychologist at Harvard, in addition to those two psychologists, and by the way, one of those psychologists, Stanley Krittner, is one of my major professors in my PhD program. He's still around. And Ram Dass is still around too. So those guys did that.
Did your father have a very similar experience too?
Yeah, he had a very positive experience. But I know people that had very negative experiences, and so does he. It ruined their life. I've known people that have become, they're worse than dead. Let me, I'll be right back. Megan, I'll come right back.
I was gonna say there's a point at which human ingenuity, I feel like, is counteractive to what nature intends, or whether you believe in creation or evolution.
Why does nature have intentions?
Well, in what nature has resulted in.
Yes. Well, here's I know where you're going with that, and I want to just answer that and then go right back to the second half. A lot of people say that we need to honor the things that evolution has given to us. For instance, my own work, my own dissertation work, talks about finding a technological way to make us non-competitive. Because when you're competitive, you're non-prosocial. It's antisocial to be competitive. In every case, it's antisocial. And that means, to be competitive means, I only succeed as I cause you to fail. The world is not big enough for that with this many people anymore. We can't keep going. We're not going to exist as a species if that continues like that. So I'm proposing the actual neuropsychology interventions to do away with that in the brain with technology. So people say, well, wait a minute, that's conflict. People that believe in evolution say, well, but conflict is what got us here. It's because it's such a good purification of DNA strategy and everything. So whatever got us to this point, we need to honor that and not touch it because it's sacrosanct, right?
Yeah.
Right. Do you know how effective in getting your DNA around rape is? Genghis Khan has more offspring than anyone else we've identified by name on the planet. And that was military rape. systematic rape. And we know that that has to go. We can't put up with that anymore. So and people really love competition because it's their darling. They entertain themselves on the television by watching people compete in zero-sum things. They want their industry to be something where when they win, somebody else loses. They want our military to get activated to go and cause somebody to have a defeat. And they're very touchy because it's tied to our limbic and our reproductive system. The whole, especially males. And the more testosterone you give somebody, they become a roid head, you know? Go ahead, you have more.
I was gonna say, even something as simple as like shoes, because I was reading this
Shoes.
article, exactly shoes,
Okay.
about how the way we are supposed to walk naturally, and how they've done studies over and over again of barefoot populations, either like island nations, places that are less industrialized like Africa, or a lot of nations in Africa, a lot of people don't wear
Yes.
shoes, right? And how we always say like, oh, these people don't have shoes, that's such a sign of poverty. But the way that people actually walk and their foot health in these barefoot populations is actually hundreds of times better than ours, where we are always shod. And a lot of the reason for that is because the shoes that we are designed to wear were actually intended so you could ride a horse.
Absolutely.
And the production of shoes.
And you know what high heels do?
Um,
Anyone look up the physiopsychology of why women wear high heels.
I've read lots about it.
It's to alter the pelvic presentation to make them more attractive.
Yeah.
Because when you, to balance, you very subtly push your pelvis forward, and that's why people don't feel dressed. When we get ready in the mirror in the morning, I don't care who you are, how appropriate you think you are. When you get ready in the morning, be honest with what you're actually trying to do. All of us. What are we really trying to evoke in other people when we put on our clothes and fix our hair or whatever? No matter who we are, no matter how decent we are, we're in a mirror doing something very competitive.
But even with like running shoes, a lot of times running shoes have this big chunky heel, right? Because they're
Not
trying.
my wife's 5 finger.
Yeah, maybe not her 5 finger. But a lot of people are trying to fix
Yes.
deficiencies in human ability to run.
Yes.
It hurts to land on your heels, so they give you a big chunky heel. But that's
Even public health hygiene does the same thing.
exactly.
When we make our kids too clean, we have them wash their hands, we wash their food so well, we make the house almost sterile because we don't want them to get any germs. Their immune system says, oh, I'm going to do something, and they identify parts of their own tissues and say, well, I'll go after that. It's like a dog that you don't give a bone to. It'll eventually gnaw on the couch. It'll find something that's not supposed to chew, and it'll chew on that, which is what our immune system does. Plus, do you know how common it is to have like touchy digestion? Like irritable bowel and all that? Do you know what one of the really effective treatments for irritable bowel is?
Fecal replacement.
Yes, and even as appetizing as that is simply to give the person worms.
And allergies, other allergies.
Yes, because it turns out that we're actually supposed to have, especially in the lower part of our gut, we're actually supposed to be kind of a septic tank. You know how septic tanks have, if you kill all the bacteria and amazing things in your septic tank, it'll just fill up. We're actually supposed, and it turns out that a healthy person has more bacteria cells in their body than they have cells of Homo sapiens. And it turns out that the bacteria in our gut actually know how to release neurotransmitters to control our actions and moods in our brain. The bacteria in your gut is dictating your behavior.
So we become like one flesh, like we share consciousness.
Yeah,
Because their motives become our motives, kind of.
darn right. Timmy. I don't, T-I-M-I is okay. I've just never seen it spelled that way, that's all. See, that's why I had to go around. But I'm just dying to know.
Isn't that why polio was a thing? Because we were getting too clean and so we were exposed to
I don't know.
Polio.
because people in other places who had been exposed to the virus had
Right.
developed immunity to it. That's why vaccines are
Well, I'm not sure, in the case of polio, I don't know how strong people's natural immunities to polio were, but that could be. If not, there are other diseases where that's the case. But it could be, I don't know enough about the history of polio.
I was just gonna ask, very unrelated question.
Yeah, it's actually, yeah, it is. It's a job one. They don't make them anymore, they went out of business a couple months ago. But mine still works, so
It's just a little
it's
fitness
the
tracker
three.
to keep track of your heart rate.
Works well.
Stuff like that. It's like a 50.
Yes, ma'am.
This is kind of
It's perfect.
I was wondering like about the technology and stuff, like the nanobots being put in the brain. I guess from a sociological standpoint, do you see it like eventually because people are talking like, oh, technology is going too far, like where's the limit and all this stuff. Do you think like from your own personal viewpoint that this like it's something that would be like worldwide, like globally mandated, or do you see it more becoming like a first world like capitalist situation?
You know, I have always a concern with new technologies that it could be like for the elite and all that, but so far it's never happened. How many of you have an iPhone? How many of, now leave your hand up if you have an iPhone but you're not rich. If you're just kind of struggling to get by, but you got an iPhone. Okay?
Now everybody feels stuck on
Very simple.
No, any Bluetooth technology. The free ear.
Kind of.
Actually, yeah.
Do any of you have it that are not rich? There are Maasai with iPhones
Right.
that have dirt hut for huts.
That's because it's so key to, I mean, society now. Like if you don't have a smartphone,
I disagree, I don't have a phone.
but you have another form of connecting to the internet at least.
Yeah, not always though, I do use my computer for homework, but I don't think it's necessary.
It
If we
isn't.
lived without it at one point, we don't.
You can go off the grid completely and have, there are people who do. There's segments of people who do that.
I think it's hard to argue that it's not a capitalist base, because even if those people have it, it doesn't mean that they're just getting it. They still have to pay money for it.
You're right, it is capitalist based.
So, I mean.
And they want those people to have it so they can manipulate them.
And it's still gonna be like when you say, okay, it's gonna be a first world thing, it's always going to start like that. The rich are always gonna have those things first.
Yes, they're gonna have them first, but lately, first to everyone seems to have it, it's just a couple of years.
And the rest of us have to adapt, because if we don't, we're left for dead.
Right.
So.
That's correct. Now, in the second part of your question though, it's not will they be allowed to have it, but will they be forced to have it? Did you hear that?
No.
Will they be forced to have it? Do you know what my dissertation gimmick is? What I'm exploring is what it would take to set it up so that no one needs to have pro-social enhancement. They don't have to. But you have to have it to have technologically mediated immortality. We're not going to make you immortal if you're still a jerk. If we can't afford you for 1,000 years, we're not going to extend you. You see what I'm saying? It's like, I think people are going to go, okay, that's a price I'd be willing to pay. I can stop being a jerk and wanting to get one over on other people every chance I get. in order to not die. I mean, at least when they got in their 70s. And if they don't, well, fine. Doesn't change anything for them, right?
It's interesting. It's interesting because how do you gauge or measure the true character then?
That is,
It's
You're
one
right.
thing for you to say, okay, I'm going to change my character, but
what does it mean?
what does it mean?
And who's going to decide that?
Yeah.
Some middle-aged white guy in a PhD program in California, right? Because everyone has a different idea about what's good. And who's the powerful?
I mean, we can argue that we each of us have an innate sense of right and wrong, but those things can be influenced by
You are so
our
doing
culture
philosophy right now.
and our culture and our upbringing and everything
You hear what she's, and
from
you
the
see
time of
what
birth
she's
to
saying?
now. Changes and shapes us.
Yeah, you hear what you're saying? You said, we all have this innate, and now you are reasoning from moral psychology, from moral philosophy. That's a branch. And you just stepped right into it and tracked it all over the classroom. And it's beautiful. Beautiful. You weren't done.
I was wondering, like what you were saying, is how if there's it like starts with the rich, but then we all kind of have this kind of, is there like a name or like just sort of like social?
A meme?
Wait,
Maybe a meme. Richard Dawkins made that up. It's an evolutionary body, a thing that isn't a living thing. It's a conceptual thing that makes its way through populations information-wise. That's what a meme is. He made up the term meme. He just invented the term. And what you're asking, is there a word for that? It's called a meme.
Okay, so
She's pent up.
yes, sorry, I don't know all these things. So when it comes to this whole issue of this technology that's coming forward, how do we manage the philosophical ideas where we have the Eastern philosophy of the Taoism and Buddhism, where it's more community based. It's one person to a community, but meanwhile with our tradition, it's more of the identity. It's the person who's the identity in their own person. How do we mediate these two? Like, how can you?
Well, in my opinion, one might be wrong, right, and the other wrong.
Which one?
I think that in terms of whether we could share the climate effectively, I think that Eastern would be right.
How did?
I don't think we can afford the Western individual, screw you, me first thing. I don't think we can afford it.
How is it that?
We're done with that, I think.
How is it that this Western idea, this Western philosophy, came to be so powerful and now we're beating everyone else out?
People forget that.
If you compete with somebody who's not competing and you're really competitive, and they keep not competing, you're probably going to win. If you declare the basketball game and they're just standing around eating a snow cone in the middle of the court, and you're keeping score and they're not, you got a really good chance.
Richard Dawkins, he does a really good analogy of genes and types of and people.
Which book are you referring to?
It's Selfish Gene, and there's the doves, there's the hawks, and there's the other one. And the doves are really passive, and the hawks are attacking.
Right.
Now, like which you have there are different types of philosophies, and they're
Yes.
fighting on it. Where do you think we are right now?
What happened to Tibet? They were doves. And interestingly, in their history, before they were doves and a spiritual beacon for the region, they were the most feared warriors in the whole of the Orient. They were vicious and skilled. The way they focused their spirituality, they focused their martial arts, and they were not to be toyed with. Plus, nobody else could fight at that altitude.
What changed?
And when you go down into the valley, when you're used to that altitude, you're in good shape. That's why a lot of ball teams put their summer training or spring training camps at high altitude. When I was a deputy in Gila County, the Cardinals, their spring training stuff was at Camp Tanazona. Some of you might be privy to that preseason stuff and follow that nonsense. All I did was get like $120 an hour to go stand there in uniform to make sure no one stormed in when they're trying to scrimmage. Usually with my back to them because I don't care about football, but I do care about $150 an hour to do that. plus they let me eat with them. They really feed out at those things, you know that? I mean, they feed big, good food too. Catered, it's not like feeding in the Navy even, I mean, it's like ridiculous.
Okay, how does having a negative character trait like occur if it's shaped by your environment though? You can't control how someone was brought up, and then they were seeing how someone else, like they, based on their environment, they became competitive, they became
Yes.
aggressive. If
Yes.
you take out certain people having that, you know, all the people not having that trait, but you still have the environment, and since we don't know exactly how our nature reacts to things, that it would still reappear because of situations.
Yes, that's a really good point. First of all, in terms of, you've all heard of environment versus heredity or nature versus nurture, right? There's a third element. It's not all just your heredity or your environment. It's not all just what you got in your DNA from your parents, or even like adding into that, which isn't, I guess you could call it epigenetic, like when you're getting impacted in the womb, you know. There's a third element. It's not just those two things that impacts our behavior and our life and our success and our sociality and all that. What's the third thing? Besides nature and nurture, what's the third thing that decides how we're going to act?
Your health.
Well, that's nature. That's nurture.
Environment.
Ourselves. You're close. You're close. You're close. Ourselves. What about ourselves?
The worms are
What about our actions? How? How do we do that when we've got this program genetically and all these environmental influences? How do we? Yes. The term I'm fishing for is either volition or free will or free choice.
Oh, there.
And I think that's what you're saying, because we choose.
Yes.
Yes. So choice and freedom actually, in most cases, can overcome both heredity and environment. You can get crap genes and be raised by crap parents in a crap home, and you can still be a superstar of any kind.
It's like how it's been proven that red meat and animal proteins, they have casein in them, or protein one that
Milk
stimulates,
has casein.
that stimulates liver cancer tumors. And now they show in rats that they did a heavy dose of casein for 3 weeks, and then they switched to a low dose, and they saw that the tumor growth backed off immensely.
Yes.
So that's the nature, nurture,
And that,
choice in a human.
and the term you're dealing with is epigenetic. But here's the thing. Recognize this. Those three things aren't actually separable.
Right.
In fact, actually, no concepts in this discussion or any discussion are actually purely, realistically separable. There are no actual separations naturally. We make that up when we just decide the model. We make a construct and say, okay, well, let's say it's divided into this, this, and this. And then we argue about it and say, well, wow, sometimes it's hard to tell. Well, doesn't this influence that? Yeah, but we made it up. Those concepts are made up. I mean, we probably didn't make up the notion of isness, but when someone acts a certain way, the dude who shot up the concert in Las Vegas.
The terrorist who shot up
Yeah. He doesn't even deserve dude anymore, right? Now, what if we find, like the guy who was the first campus shooter in our recent history, from the clock tower, that guy actually wrote out a request that he be autopsied wrong with his brain, and they autopsied him, and he had a tumor, exactly the kind of tumor that makes people go off their nut in their prefrontal cortex. And he felt like he had something wrong with him, and he sought help, and they didn't find it. He knew something was going wacko. Now, what if this guy gets autopsied, and we find out that he had a big old massive tumor, he had a big ganglioma? Then what do we say about it? Well, at some point, you don't have the freedom to do otherwise when you're diseased. At some
But if he
point,
lived a quiet life beforehand.
but what if you got a tumor 6 months ago and it just got to this point, and the tumor did this? Damn him still?
Would you see the media assuming that he was living a quiet life if he had any other color skin though?
Sure. It just depends on what seems to at the moment to make sense. Yeah, it just depends on which media. I mean, people are always saying either the media is liberal or the media is conservative. The media is capitalistic. They just want clicks. So their advertisers, well, they can jack up the price for the advertisers. It's just greed based. It's not. I don't think they have any values.
I mean, just like if they're gonna autopsy, if they were to autopsy his dad and find out that he also has something like mental illness, at the very least, they should do that in all circumstances
For everyone that acts like that.
Yeah, but like obviously they wouldn't.
Well, if they live, autopsies are less convenient.
How do we handle sociopaths and psychopaths who they don't have it?
Do you know how we handle them now? We hire them as consultants, bring them to the boardroom of Fortune 500 companies, and ask them to help us identify ways that management can root out all the people capable of empathy and get them out of the corporation because they're a disadvantage.
So are you saying we don't actually have choice always?
We don't always have choice. Correct.
So like if you have a tumor, is that
If you have a seizure, are you choosing to have a seizure?
no?
You are?
No, like if
I mean, maybe somebody is if they knew that skipping a meds would give them a seizure.
Hopefully not on purpose.
But I mean, that's a seizure that's a grand mal. They fall down on the floor and go tonic-clonic and they ride and foam and kick around, and then they have a post-lethal state afterwards. And that, we have a box to put that, we have a construct for that. But realize that some kinds of epilepsy just cause somebody to do something kind of uncharacteristic. Really.
So,
Never mind. Never mind.
Too many questions.
If you get hit in the head, you're just dazed, and you do something ridiculous, like pull out in front of a car after you get hit in the head, your judgment is off. After you just got somebody just pounded you right in the forehead, and you're dazed, and you just, without thinking, you just sort of, that's what you were going to do anyway, and you just execute the task, but you have reduced capacity, so you pull right in front of a car and hurt people. You didn't do it by choice.
so what you're doing right now is kind of like breaking down free will, but what it seems like now is kind of like it's more so an illusion of us making choices. And
Well, I think we
rather-
actually have choices.
choices, but
Free choices.
Right, but a lot of choices that we make are based off responses.
Or based on what?
Responses to like circumstance.
Yes,
So
so we didn't
for-
predict the circumstances.
Right, like just how you said, did we choose to have a seizure? Okay, like us here didn't choose, but what's in here and the way we responded to the neurons firing,
Oh, at some
That
level
choice
there
was
was
made.
an action that responded to the
and it
environment.
was a response
Yes.
rather than a choice.
So when we say the term you or me or person, recognize that that's also just a construct, and it varies from culture to culture what we mean when we say that. some very valid cultures have a very different notion of the term self, or me, or person. Very, very different. And it is just a construct, the notion that I stop where my sensation stops, where my membranes are. Chapter 2.
Right. I have a reference to that. It's like, so it was talking about being self-conscious. So,
did you hear what she said? Chapter 2? She whispered, chapter 2.
Yeah. So, no, that's why I was saying this right now. Okay.
BOL when you're patrolling chapter 2.
So, like, when we're asked, like, who we are, it's always reflective of, like, what we think other people see, right? So when we're self-conscious, we're conscious of ourselves, but when we're conscious of others and the way they act, we're also being self-conscious.
What if you thought that other...
Because it's like inner conscious.
What if
like
what you're pointing to, you had the idea that was also you?
Exactly, I do. Like, this person, like me, we're the same thing. We're just we have different experiences that made us an expression of, you get me? So when we were growing up, I wasn't born knowing English. I was taught English. So just like somebody else is taught Spanish, we were born the same thing. We became ourselves.
Interestingly, do you know that there is a language that everybody that does speak any language actually speaks? They don't speak it, but it is actually happening in their brain, called mental ease. And that the brain then translates it into the language that you learn, or whichever one you're choosing to speak. Isn't that cool? And it means that no matter what language you're speaking, if we do a brain scan at the right type, you think of, say, an apple, doesn't matter what language you speak, we can recognize the pattern for thinking of apple when you say apple. No matter what language you speak, we can look at a similar pattern.
Okay, so going back to the whole Las Vegas concert thing, so a friend of mine and I were speaking, and we're saying, she was saying that she felt sorry for the guy. She was like, wow, I feel sorry for him because of what he may have gone through to think of doing that, And I was like, no, I feel nothing like that towards him, because then I could say the same for just about any criminal.
Sure.
And I don't.
Boy, I had this conversation with fellow deputies. I had this conversation with one deputy who, he had been molested as a child. And whenever we were dealing with somebody who was a child abuser of any kind, he just lit up, and we'd be trying to get somebody in or out of jail or over to court or whatever. And no matter what, if this guy knew that there was somebody like that, he would go and he would just, lecture, and swear at him and everything. It's like, dude, you're gonna get in trouble. You better leave him alone. The guy's not even been to trial. You don't even know. He said, oh, I can tell. We'll just use you instead of the jury. No. Here's a real tough question. This one only works with people that are doing business with the Christianity model. Does Jesus feel compassion and pity and sympathy and love for the man who shot those people? See, our job is to have his character reproduced in us, and to have that tenderness and fondness for everything that's alive, like he did.
But using that as a reason to not blame him so much doesn't explain why there's articles
Oh, I'm blaming him.
like being like, how did he pull it off, thinking he's like brilliant for how he did it, when in reality if anyone else had done that it
Sure.
would have been
Well, yeah, I mean, there's always bigotry. I mean, people, please don't take this wrong. There's one reason why I'm glad we're going through what we're going through as a country and a culture right now. I'm sick and tired of people being able to camouflage their racism so well. I'm sick and tired of people being two-faced about it. Sick and tired of it. So far, I have never worked anywhere, where I haven't had to put up with, if it's just some other white guy, and he's talking to me, talking like, I would wonder if the guy puts on sheets and goes and burns crosses. You know, this heinous bigotry. This like, and then I watch that person when he's with people of color, and this is not just one person. This is so common among white men. So common. I know. I'm talking about, I'm there when these dudes run their filthy racist mouths. They're well placed in the church. I've contacted them here. I've heard their nonsense here. I've heard it as a cop. I've heard it as a public school teacher. I've heard it working in financial services. I've heard it everywhere. Whenever it's like, oh, another white guy, you know? It's like an old sketch that Eddie Murphy did on Saturday Night Live. I don't know if you guys are, you can YouTube this, I think it's probably on there, where he goes undercover as a white man. And man, the makeup job was really amazing. Because it was really him, but there's no way you'd have known it wasn't some random Joe white guy. And it shows him going into the community, getting on the bus and everything. And as soon as the last person of color gets off the bus, then a white bus driver like relaxes, it's like opening a champagne bottle and says, "Oh, dude, you don't have to pay. You're white." You know. That wasn't even funny to me when I saw that the first time. You have no idea how real, how often that crap actually is the way life is in this world. It's sick. And anybody who's saying that there's no reason for people to try whatever kind of protest they have to try to move it along, because it's like it's stuck, like that feeling of hovering over the porcelain, but you're not quite there to puke. But you have this sick feeling. I mean, I've been feeling it for half of a century now. So I'm going, maybe we need to see people for what they are. Because there's a lot of hate and bigotry, isn't there? I'm so sick of people saying, well, what are you complaining about? Look how so many things are good. They're not good. So, in a way, the horrible year that we're having in our culture and the horrible year before, maybe that's what some of the things look like back when Dr. King was leading protests and the like, you know? I just hope people don't die out and lose their steam. I saw a little thing on the news where someone said that the people that were like, whatever they're doing with the flag salute or something at the football games, someone said, yeah, that's kind of dying down. What do you mean it's dying down? They're bored with it now? That's okay, we gave it our thing, you know, and our publicist says, but I don't know if that's true, but I saw this little thing saying, yeah, it's kind of like less this weekend than last weekend, so if people are getting anything done, they're going to actually have to have some resolve. They can't just be impatient like with the people in the Occupy movement. You know, it's like the authorities are, first they do the wrong thing, and we got Einstein there with this pepper spray at Davis, you know, who made a good poster child for the idiot. But then they got smart and they're like, okay, well, let's just see how long you like sleeping in a tent in the park when winter comes. Not so long. You just let them run out of steam. It's like, oh, here, you want some meals? You know, let's bring some pork pots. You know, here's some Lysol. You know, have a good time. You know, we'll put a trash can in there for you. Have fun. You know. And then it's like, well, that's not so much fun. You're gonna beat us and send us to jail. It makes better footage. No, we're not into that. And then they lose their thing. You know, the philosophers that we're talking about, including Socrates, lived at a time where there was social upheaval. And it looked like there was progress, like he was opening some lines. But he got dead over this. And it wasn't a sniper. It wasn't like a Dr. King thing. He got the death penalty, and it was carried out. He died because of these ideas. These are dangerous, dangerous ideas. You can't do honest philosophy, I don't think, and come up with some straight-faced support for racism and classism. Well, and he said you can't do that and come up with support for democracy. Wait a minute, that's something that we happen to like. It is, what are you going to do? Charity instead? And he said, no, what you need is not to have the 51% stupidest people deciding everything for society. How would you like to have it? The 51% stupidest voters deciding everything? That's actual democracy. Fortunately, we don't live in a democracy. We live in a republic. I didn't say that was fortunate, but unfortunately, we don't live in a democracy.
With like nature versus nurture and free will, how does free will come into play with like the need for gun control?
Who says there's a need?
Do you think there's a need? Like when it, like balancing the two, how do you balance like gun control and free will?
Well, how do you control guns? Would you rather the guy make a bomb and blow up the whole concert, or just sit there with a rifle and shoot one at a time? And neither, of course, but if somebody's going to do destruction, what would you rather have, a bomb or a rifle? Because I'd rather be trying to get away from a rifle than a bomb. Because the bomb could have killed everyone in attendance. And we demonstrated the federal building in Oklahoma that you can make a bomb out of stuff from the hardware store. And that'll always be true. Yeah, anarchist cookbook. So, do we need bomb control? In England, they're actually seriously talking about making it illegal to have a knife in your silverware drawer that has a point.
The way I think about it is like, I'm honestly surprised it doesn't happen so often because we have free will. And those thoughts do cross people's minds. Like, if I wanted to, I could go get a gun and shoot someone, you know? But people aren't actively making those decisions.
Do you know
Something's
that
stopping us?
there, right now, it seems like things are on the increase because we are increasingly hearing about every little assault in Mumbai. We get a tweet or a text. We get a text from some, breaking news. Somebody got shot at a convenience store in Bangladesh. When I was growing up in Sacramento, if it happened in Fresno, we wouldn't have heard about it. We heard about what happened in Sacramento on the news, and nothing else. We're only on at 6 and 10, or 6 and 11, depending on what channel you watch. Steven Pinker's book, if you guys are interested in this topic, Steven Pinker's book, The Better Angels of Our Nature, pretty strong argument to show that violence has drastically declined, and it's still on the decline in our species. Drastically. So, some of you might want to take note of that book. That's a really important book. I'm going to test you over it, but you might want to consider, you know what? I got a shortcut for you. Look up Steven Pinker, like in something like Decline in Violence or whatever, logarithmic social progress or whatever, anything like that on YouTube. You can watch it, do a 10-minute thing. Steven Pinker, he's a wild-haired MIT professor.
So we're kind of saying that like violence hasn't increased, we just have like better communication.
Correct.
Clear about it.
Correct.
So don't you think the better communication like kind of makes it happen more because of copycat violence and things like that?
It might be, but it would be like this. It happens to be that violence is going down like that. So instead of going down, and that might be what it would be the rate it would be going if we didn't have the copycat thing. But since we have the copycat thing, maybe it's going down like that. Yeah, with little dips. Well, lots of dips. Because I'm just really normalizing that curve there. Just, well, they develop it. It develops probably because of a program in the DNA. You want to look up the question you're asking. The theoretical work was done by Noam Chomsky at MIT. You know who?
We're okay with, whether it's,
Where's what?